Hello, welcome to another Houdini videos. In this video, we're going to make this antique church lamp with some procedural approaches here and there, as you can see. So let's start it by just, of course, making geometry. Since we want to make a geometry system, we are going to switch here to the geometry layers. Now, first thing to do is I'm going to just create a very simple line. With that line, I want to reorientate this. I'm going to click on the handle and I'm just going to rotate it like so. So we have basically lying it now on the grid here. Now this line, we can make it a bit bigger. That depends on what you want. And we can also add more points to this. So maybe let's take around 40 for now. Doesn't matter that much. But we will basically now bend the line. So that's why we need the points, because otherwise we won't have like a real bending effect. So I'm going to use the bend node. And we plug that in over here. And we're going to say that we want to capture the region. And now we can click where we want the bending to begin and to start. So a great way to do this as well is to also enable here the snapping options. So we can now snap to the points and just click on that. And as you can see now, we can just have a basic bevel on the line. So this bevel is very useful to control a lot of things of this tool. What you could do as well is you can also use the length scale. So we can actually manipulate the length of this. You could also link the value of this length here to our capture length. So these need to be the same value, as you could see. So we can just quickly just right click, say we want to copy this value, and we're going to just remove this and say we want to paste a reference. So now we're basically pasting a link to getting the line 1 value and looking for distance. So if I now would change the distance here, my bevel will change to that as well. So that is the first part, just making this beveling part. Now next I want to actually copy a certain shape on this line. So I want to copy these like ornament shapes and so on, like the special shapes on this line. So first of all, we need to create a example like that. So that's on the side here, start creating that. So what I will do is I will just use the curve node. And here I'm going to switch also then to a top view, for example. Make it a bit bigger. And I'm going to just draw a shape like that. And by default, we are here in Bezier mode. So we can draw this in a Bezier curve. So that means that we can, if we hold the mouse, we can just draw like so. I personally find it sometimes just difficult for the shape that I want to go for. So what I will do is I will just go to a polygon shape. And I will just draw something very basic like so. So I will just click here, hold shift. So we can have like a straight line, and we can just make something that looks like this. Then we go here down. And when you're done, you press enter. So something like this doesn't have to be perfect. We can still now go into here editing mode. And we can, for example, now move this bit to this direction, for example, or move the points a bit like so. So we can still quickly edit this. Now to actually like make a more like curved version of this, I'm just going to simply take a resample. So resample will add more points. So as you can see, if I enable points here, we will add more points, and it will also sort of like see, as you can see, like curve this bit. Now a trick here is to actually use the subdivision curve. So we'll actually do like a subdivision on the curve, which will make it smoother. So for that to be actually fully more detailed, we actually need to lower this value, which means it will create more points. So right now it's creates more of these points. We can just maybe here switch to maximum segments and increase that. So as you can see, it will nicely make like these nice shapes like so. And again, you can still go back here and start to tweak them. If you're not happy with how they are looking, you can just go back and tweak those things. What you can always do is you can also afterwards do a smoothing. If you're still not happy with how this looks, you can, as you can see here, apply like a smoothing value. So maybe some smoothing could be nice to have like these areas a bit less hard-edged. So that is done. We have that shape. I also want to just have a simple line underneath that. And the moment you will see why. So I'm going to here grab a line, and I will just rotate this back like so. And I will probably make it the size that is not very large, like 0.5. So I have something like this. So the line is bigger than my ornament shape here. So it's quite important to have. And then we simply merge these together like so. Might need to maybe do some rotation on that, since they are all just laying flat on the grid. I just probably want to rotate this upwards, so like this. So now I have my sort of like shape where I would like to see the details on. So let's try to translate the details on the shape, and we can do that by using the chain node. So the chain node will sort of like repeat this detail over the line. So the first input is the object we want to sort of like copy or chain, and then the line is then how much times do we have to do that. And you can see that the tool now throws out an error, and it has like trouble to define or create a pattern when the pieces have basically 0 in the width value. So that means that I actually need to rotate this 90 degrees, and now it works. So because we need to rotate this because it doesn't have any width, so we only have like a height and a length, but we don't have like a width value because we're just working with curves. So the tool is like saying that I cannot copy this because you don't basically have a three-dimensional shape. So we can see that we are having these lines, then our curl, and then the lines again. So we want to change our finding pieces by just find by attribute. And now we are having this. I can also see that I probably also need to add more points here as well, as you can see, to make it actually more rounder. So adding, for example, like a few of them, like 5, will make it more rounder. So here we can increase off like the poly count a bit. So now we have that shape. So that looks pretty good. What you might sometimes notice is that it will not always go and take the full length. So this is like the ending. So we want to use the remapping here, and we want to change this to curve length. And now it's actually taking the full length of the curve. Another thing is actually under alignment, we don't want to center geometry. So you can see that will automatically center the geometry, but I don't want that. Some other cool things you can do here is, for example, deformation and scaling. So you can scale things up or down. We can also here use this remapping here to, for example, make the end smaller. So this could be nice that this is a bit larger and then we go smaller on the end here. Now, next step, what we can simply do is, for example, do the sweeping node. So we are going to sweep here with a round tube shape. And of course, this might be too large. So we are doing it like so. Now, what I currently don't like is that we are sweeping both of them with like the same values. So I want to actually split the ornaments and the normal lines. So here, what I will do here is I will actually now start making group nodes here. So we're just going to say group. And we are going to call this, for example, the spline or splines or curve nodes or something. Just give this a name that you know. And after we do the chain nodes, we can still access the group data, and we can just simply say split that data. So here we're going to split nodes, and we're going to say split the lines. So now you will see that we are able to now get those two separately. And this is now very useful now to, for example, play around with different sizes here than the other one. So here what we can also do is we can also use the ramp here. So I can make things like so. So they are actually smaller nearing the end. So this looks a bit better. We can always like play around with how much resolution we are using here. So, but at the moment, this is good enough for my use case. We can also use the facet node to optimize things a bit more. So this will actually remove your inline points if you enable that. And if you slowly increase this value, you will remove more and more points. So this way we can make it a bit more lower in poly count. So in this case, I'm not going to mind it too much, but this is like a way of getting some topology So that is basically done. Then for the other parts, if I just quickly place a null node so we can just look at it, we can see that this is actually still built out of multiple primitives. So you can see that I have actually 3 primitives here. I can also view my primitives. So I have 0, 1, and 2. This should actually be fully merged. So we can use a polypath node and make sure that our curve is fully merged as one single line. So you can see that by just placing this node, it will do that. Sometimes you might have to enable connect ends, which can also help. But in this case, it's automatically merging this into one single line. So I can now actually just delete this node. What we can also do is we can now also, for example, copy a small part on like the last part of the line, for example, like a small curl, sort of like have a ending. So this is where it begins, then it ramps up here, and then it sort of like ends into like another curl or shape or whatever. So we can do something like that. So to do that, I first of all need to know how can I get that last point. And often we would look at point numbers. So right now we go from 4, 3, 2, 1, like the numbers are like all over the place. So we need to do a sorting of that. So we're going to place a sort node. And let's change the sorting order by vertex order. And you can see that here is 0, and then we're going to go up to the higher number. What you could also, for example, try a sorting order is, for example, the x-axis. So everything is now built in the x-axis. So this is going to be 0, and this is going to be the highest number. So that might be some options you want to change and play around with to see what works best. What we then do is we then calculate the orient along curve. So we want to know what orientation do we need to copy that last part on. So let's say I build a certain shape here. How should that behave on this part? And we probably want to enable a couple settings here. So we want to enable here the end tangent. So we'll look at some of that data. We can also enable this one, change this to y-axis, and also enable end up target. So these end values are often meaning towards the end of the line, so either here or here. So by doing that, it will actually extrapolate some data here as well. It will calculate some better data for the ending, so that might be interesting to try. Also here, rotations will also be interesting to play around with. So based on if I make a curve, we might have some additional rotation to that. Now, since I only want to copy a shape here on the last part, I'm just going to say blast away everything except from point 0. So just will fill in 0 here, and I will say look for specifically points and inversely. So now we have that point here. Then for the shape I want to copy on this point, I'm basically going to go back here and grab this part where I made that bevel here. You can make something that's a bit smaller. Like, let's say the length of this is, for example, 0.25, and we don't need that many points. So let's say 5 points, and then we are bending it like so. So we just have like this little line. We can like bend it more or less. So let's just see and what happens if we do like the copy to points method. So copy to points, copy the shape on the points. And now we should be able to see if I also maybe already merge here this part with this part, we should now be able to see that we have now copied this shape on there. Now, it's currently rotated in the wrong direction, and that's why I told you that we might have to go back into the additional rotations here, and we might need to change here some of this rotation value. So here we're probably going to have to fill in 90, and now we have a shape like so. So with this thing here, we can now define how this should look. Like if you really want to like curl it here at the end, you can do that. You can add some more topology here. So you can play around with that. So it depends on what you like. I'm just going to keep it simple and do something like this, because I will copy some models on here as well later on. Now to finish this off, we actually need to do the same thing as before. So these are actually now 2 primitives. So we have 0 and 1. So we will need to repeat this polypathing step to merge the lines. So here, if I plug this in, you're now having just like one single polygon. Then we can just simply do a sweeping step. So sweep node, make sure it's set to round tube. And we can now play around here with the radius, so maybe a bit smaller. We can again use the ramp here to control how large it should be. So here I have to change it like so, for example, we can play around with that. So because I will copy model here on, maybe it's nicer to be a little bit thicker. So we have something like so. And we then finish off now again by merging our results. So here we have the ones from the more ornaments, and then we have our normal style. So with the setup, we can now quickly play around with the size. I can add more divisions here if I need to, and make a shape like so. So that all works fine. At this stage, we can already do a symmetry, because this will just be a symmetrical shape. So we have a symmetry like so, which can also be interesting, but we can just do a symmetry like this. So we're having a shape like so. So this is sort of like our first step. We can always go back here to our bend node, and we can play around with that, as you can see. We can start playing around with these things. So we can make some pretty cool and also quite interactive way of doing this. But this is basically what we are having now. So as you can see, you can also make things like this. And this is basically because of like the symmetry. We can make pretty cool stuff. So again, all interactive with the curve node, all interactive with this bending node. We can do some pretty cool stuff like this. And all procedurally done. So we can generate as many times as we want. Now let's move over into making a lantern type of shape or model. So I'm going to copy them here, like on a couple places on this model. So first I want to just create that model, and then I will write the logic to like actually copy paste this on the models here as well. So we're going to go here to the side, and I'm just going to start off with a sphere. And we're going to do a couple Boolean operations here to then define that look. So my sphere, we're going to make sure it's a polygon mesh. I can use other types that will create this geometry. And from that, what I will do is I will do an extrusion. So extrude. And we can extrude this. But what we want to do is we can now enable also like the output back. So we sort of like have a shell effect. So the reason for that is if I now would do a Boolean, let's for example take a simple box to demo this. Let's make the box like so. So just have a box like that, and we can boolean these two together, maybe the other way around. So you can see that we can, for example, have something like this where this extrusion is taking care of like the inside. So we're creating like a shell. So probably have to reverse the boolean actually. So subtraction back again here. So we're going to create something as good seen like that. So instead of a box, of course, we want to create something that's a bit more interesting in shape. So I'm going to remove that, and let's make something a bit more interesting. What I will do is I will take the curve node, and I can draw an interesting shape. So here, curve, might enable the grid to see how big I'm actually drawing this. And I probably prefer again to go with polygon mode. And I'm going to switch here to my top view, and I'm just going to then draw something very simple. So let's start over here. I'm going to hold shift and make something that looks, for example, something like this, and press enter. Now what we need to do is we want to then have a symmetry version of that, so we're going to use the symmetrize, and we need to set the right symmetry like so. So we have this shape. Then we need to actually make this back into like a polygon, since this is just like curves, and we're going to use the polypad for this. So polypad is to convert into like polygons and convert into one single polygon, and we want to enable two end points and make isolated loop. And this will actually create then a polygon for us to work with. Furthermore, we can do, for example, like a transform. So we probably want to rotate this like so in the middle of the world. And we want to then give this some thicken. We can also use the extrusion node. Here we can, for example, use the thicken node. and we can thicken in both directions. So basically we are now extruding in both directions. So if I now increase this, you can see that we can extrude in both directions. Then we're going to use a duplication node. You can already, for example, now fill this in the Boolean, and now we have something like that. So we have our shape. But I want to probably now here create multiple of them. Now a quick trick here is to grab here our number, and we can just drag and drop this here into that rotation value, and we're going to say get a relative reference. So it will actually now grab that value, which is 2. And what we need to do here is we need to say that we want to have, for example, 180 degrees divided by that number. So whenever time we are getting this number higher, it will automatically here, as you can see, sort this out into like an evenly spaced out degree. So we can, for example, say number 4 or 5, maybe something like this. But yeah, we will see how that looks. So let's plug that in over here. And now we have that shape. So we have these shapes in there. Now I want that actually to be reversed. So instead of the operation of subtraction, I'm going to say intersection like that. And then the only thing left here is to now actually get back the bottom shape. And to do that, we can just simply grab a box or, for example, like a tube. And we can just make the tube large enough so it actually grabs that bottom. So we're going to merge these two together like so. So this is our geometry. Our tube, of course, has to be closed and make sure it's actual geometry shapes. And we're going to fill this in over here, and you will see that now we have this result. So I can now play around with the tube. And I can, for example, say something like this. And I can always go back here with the copy node or this duplication nodes and maybe reduce this to 6. And then we have a result like that. So this is the shape I'm currently having. You can still play around with this, like it's just like a Boolean operation, which means it's quite flexible in how this would work. What we can also do to add more details is go, for example, back here. And what we can do is we can grab a couple primitives here. If I disable the lock here. So we can here grab a couple primitives. Like so. We can, for example, do an extrusion of that. So I'm going to quickly switch here to polymodeling. And I'm going to grab my extrusion. Like so. And let's see how that looks after the Boolean. Now, as you can see, now we have like some more interesting shapes. So you can just like, again, like I said, you can play around with these shapes like we were just doing Boolean operations. So we are quite flexible. Now to finish this off, I might place a merge node here, and maybe let's do a little sphere at the top, at the bottom. So like so, and we're going to just here drag this down, and we're going to scale this very small, like 0.2, for example. Maybe set this to a normal polygon shape, and for example, do something like that. So we have something like this shape, for example. You can enhance this more and more. You can also just model it in another program if you want to, and just import it as well. But this is then here. Let's maybe do frame. This is then our basic shape. So now we have defined the shape. We might want to still do a transform here. So in case we need to rotate or scale this, we can just quickly here scale this and rotate this around. So that might be useful. So now we need to define where can I copy this on. So what I will do is I will go back here to my chain node. And here we have created our shapes. So for example, here we had our line shape. So with that, what we can say is that, for example, here on this point, I want to have that model copied. So I can just simply do another group node. And we're going to plug that in over here. And we're going to say it's a point group. And this is then for instance. This is for instancing. And now we only have to select a point where we want to have my model on. So I'm going to here click on the handle. And for example, I'm going to say this point and press enter. So this point currently will then be used for instancing. So in our system, when we calculate like our whole setup, we then grab, for example, the blast node, and we're gonna place it over here. So here we have these shapes. And when I then say to extract, for example, the instances and say delete non-selected, we are now able here, as you can see, to extract at one single point. And now with that, we can just do a copy to points. So copy to points, and we can just copy the points with that shape over here, like so. And of course, like I mentioned, we might need to scale this down. And we might want to also move this up, like so. So we can fine tune these things. Maybe a bit bigger, like that. So when we merge these together, so merge, or we can actually just here add that to this result. And we have something like that. Now it's quite flexible to change this as well. Let's go back to here, these instancing. And let's say you don't like the position of this. So we can just quickly here grab this handle again. And for example, say we want it to be here and press enter. And we are now just having then, as you can see, that other position here. So you can quickly switch things around. So that's how we can quickly get that model there. Now I also want this model over here at this end. So let's calculate that position as well. So when we calculate our line over here and we look at the point numbers, we basically need to get like the highest number. So we can quickly do that by group by range. So this will automatically then get the highest number or the end number. So we're going to say that this is points. We can also call this, for example, instancing points. And what we need to do here is we need to get the highest number and invert the range. So now we are selecting that number. Then again, we're going to blast away the things that we don't need. So here, blast instance and reverse that. So we have that single point. Then again, we need to merge stuff together. So we need to merge the points from this part with this part. And now we are having, as you can see, that result. So we have now this. And that's basically it for how we calculate these positions. So you can do multiple things. You can add more models. You can copy more of them. You can play around with it. But that's basically how we can do that over here. Now, next part, another interesting part is adding chains. So we have now this model. Let's say we want to place this in our environment. It needs to be held up by, for example, change in the air. So we need to calculate again that position. So we can use the same trick that we did for instancing. So we can select the point, and that sort of is the starting point of my instance or the chain. So we're going to do again a group node. And in here, we will say that we would like to have this as, for example, the chain. And this is, of course, points. And now we need to select the starting point of that. So for example, here, this is where my chain will start. Or you can, for example, say here maybe. So you can play around with that. Then we need to do the same thing as before here. So we need to do a blast node of that. And maybe go here on the side, because we will need to make some room for that. So instead of instance, we need to switch this to chain. And now we have that the points of the chain. Now, what I want to do with that is I would also like to set an add node here. In this add node, we can basically say enable points. So this will add now one single point here at the space 0, 0, 0. So I don't want them to be at 0. I just want to lift this up and we want to merge that together. So why I do this is because I want to now attach these single points directly to this one single point. So that way I can sort of like create a chain. So this will be like the anchor point where everything is connected. So we're going to find out a way on connecting the lines. The next thing that we'll do might be quite interesting to take a look at. So what I will do here is if I look at the points, we can see that we go from 0, 1, and 2. If I now would reverse the order of the merge node, so this will be my first input, this node becomes 0, and then we have 1 and 2. So I will use this to my advantage to now connect the lines together, because I know 0 will always be this anchor point. So that's something to keep in mind here. So I will use this into my advantage that 0 is my anchoring point. And I will now use a wrangle here to connect this. There are many ways of how we can connect different lines, but it might be interesting here to use some VEX code for that. So what we want to do is we want to add a primitive. So this is a function, add primitive. And we want to say what things do we want to connect. So first of all, we need to say what geometry do we want to connect. So we're going to say connect in geometry 0. And what we want to do is we want to add a polyline. Then we want to connect from where? So we want to connect from point 0 to the current point number. So close this off. And let's see if that works. So as you can see, we're now creating this effect. So again, we are just creating a polyline that goes from point 0 to the current point number in the VEX code. So that's sort of why this code works. Now, currently what is happening is that it can actually run on point 0 as well. So in my case, the code will run 3 times. So it will run over the points. So it will run over point 0, over point 1, and over point 2. So that means that the first time it runs, it means it will try to connect point 0 with point 0 itself. So that's why we actually have 3 primitives here, is because there is like one single hidden primitive connecting point 0 with point 0, which is of course not really what we want. So we can say that we can only run this data over specific amounts of points. So we can say that to run this data except on point 0. So using this means that we only run over points that are not 0. So if I now go back here, we can see that we only have 2 primitives. So here, 2 primitives. So if I would fill in number 1, we will only connect point 0 with 1. If I fill number 2, we're only connecting 0 and 2. So here, we are just saying to not run over point 0 because we don't need to connect it with anything. So of course, we are using some VEX, so lines connecting, just so you know in later stages if you want to go back to this. Then what I will do with this information further is I will do a resample. So this will add multiple points on the line. So here, as you can see, we might even need more of them. So let's maybe go to 0, 5. So we have a bit more of them. What we can also do is maybe we can do a random deletion. So here we can do labs random delete. And we can, for example, randomly delete primitives. We can say that we, for example, want to select primitives and, for example, delete them by the count. And let's fill in our count is 1. And you can see that this one is now selected. And we can now say that delete non-selected and disable color. So this means that we will only have one single chain now on this line. If I fill in 2, we will have 2 of them. So this basically means that if I would go back over here and if I would make my line large enough, we can basically now have like multiple ways of connecting this. So maybe I need to put this a bit higher. So you can see we have multiple lines of connecting this. So this maybe might be too much. And that's why we can, for example, say delete some of them, and then we can like randomly delete them. So maybe let's go back and make it a bit smaller again, like so. So after that, what we want to do is we want to then actually make a chain out of this. So what I will do is I will just grab a torus shape, so torus, and let's convert this into like a chain type model. So I will bring the rows and columns down to 3 and 8. So we have something like that. And I also want to rotate this like so. And what we can now do, or what we can now see here in top view, is that we can just now press number 2 to select points, and now press T to move them. This will create an edit node, and we can start moving things around. So now I can move these things like so. We might also want to do match axis, so this will center the geometry automatically. And now we have like a very basic chain model. Then we need to copy 2 points, or actually copy 2 curves in this case, and fill in the geometry and the curves. So now we have that result. Now we might want to go here and play around with some settings. Let's first of all check here our rotations and scales. So we can scale this down quickly here. And we can also here apply some rotation. So here let's find out which one we need to use. I think having 90 degrees over here, like so. And I'm gonna have to play around here with like the twist and the roll here of the values. And now we can sort of like create a chain. And again, we can merge this together with the merge node over here. And now we have something like this. So now we can actually use this to hang this in the scene or in the environment you're building. We can also here continue building the chain up, and we can just, for example, do transform. And we can now grab this and put it higher. And we're going to merge these together. So these two single points. And we want to then use an add node to connect them. And in here, we're going to go to polygons. We're going to say by group, and it will probably automatically here connect this to a polygon. Then we want to do the same thing as here. So I'm going to copy this resample, and I'm also going to here grab the copy 2 points, and we're going to make a chain out of that. And we're going to merge these together. So place a merge node. I'm going to grab that line over here and do something like that. So now we have like something like this. So if you think the changes are too small, you can just here make the spacing a bit larger, like set, let's say, for example, 6. Here as well, 6. And then we can, for example, play around here with like the scaling values. What we can also do is we can actually create like a, for example, like a ring over here. So we can do a torus shape, so torus, and we can do then a copy 2 points. And we're going to copy the torus with, for example, our first point here. So this is the anchor point. Maybe I can just call it anchor point, for example. Then if we merge this together, we probably like have to tweak this. So we're going to have to rotate this and then probably play around here with like the scaling of that. Have like better connections. We can here place another transform node, and we can then just move this up like so. That's done. And what we can also do is we can also use a carve node here on the other side. So here we can place a carve node, and with that, as you can see, we can like carve or cut out parts of the line. So we have like here the second and the first view, and with that we can control how far the curve goes. And if I now go back, we now have something like that. So you can see that we can, for example, also use the carve node here for like having some little tweaking over there. And then we have something like this. So now again, we are basically done. You can, for example, still add multiple things and other details and so on, but our main system here is in place. So I can always go back here to this bend node. And as you can see, I can play around with this. I can make this larger. I can bend this more like so. I can always go back here and, for example, add more of the chains. So here they are basically all of them. So it could be cool if that sort of like fits in the project. So here we can say only 2 of them. So I can play around with a lot of settings. So that's where I'm going to basically now end up this tutorial. You can still like wrap this up into like digital assets. You can then expose different values, play around with things and so on. But that's basically how you can make this setup. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and feel free to like, subscribe, and see you in the next one.